She was last seen descending a staircase that no longer exists. The mansion is gone. The street was renamed, every servant relocated, and the guest registry for that night burned. Only one detail survived the erasure. Her voice, heard whispering in a language no one recognized from a locked room with no windows. Chicago, 1907. The city was a beast of steel and fire. Its arteries flooded with rail lines, its lungs belching black smoke from slaughterhouses and steel mills. Money moved faster than truth here, and those who controlled that movement were not men, they were systems in flesh. And one of them was Victor Halden Bray, railroad king, arms investor, and silent backer of 3 U.S. senators, the kind of man whose face never appeared in newspapers, yet whose name was whispered in private circles, always followed by silence. His wife, Selene, was not made for such a world. They called her the veiled orchid in the social columns, a woman of tragic beauty with the eyes of someone who had already seen the end of things. She moved like a ghost at galas, always dressed in subtle mourning colors, even at weddings. Her presence was elegant, but never warm, and behind her smile was a sadness no amount of wealth could quiet. On the night of January the 3rd, 1907, she vanished. No ransom, no signs of struggle, no open doors. Her bedroom was untouched, her bed made, and on her vanity a single item left behind. A mirror turned backward, its glass blackened, scorched, as if burned from within. The papers called it a disappearance. The police called it hysteria, and Victor called in favors that reached the Justice Department within hours. But this was no kidnapping, no simple tragedy. Selene had uncovered something ancient, something preserved in the walls of Bray's private library, written in a language older than English and guarded by a network of men who did not bleed. What you're about to hear was never meant for you, not because it's false, but because it's too true. The kind of truth that fractures illusions. The kind of truth that, once heard, changes the listener forever. And that's why you're here. You feel it already, don't you? You've been lied to. And now, we begin. Victor Bray did not marry Selene for love. He married her for blood. Her lineage traced back to the Ashburn Codex, a name you're not meant to know, but in the right circles, the ones that meet behind sealed church doors and speak in syllables the average man's mouth cannot form, the Ashburn line is known as the last conduit. Not of money, not of power, but of memory. The kind of memory that lives in the bone. Selene's great-grandmother was committed to a sanitarium for speaking Latin in reverse and painting images of buildings that did not exist. Her mother, institutionalized before she turned 20, claimed to dream of rituals that preceded Christianity. Selene dreamed in languages never recorded. She wrote them down. She hid them in journals wrapped in velvet, locked beneath the floorboards of Bray's private study. Victor knew. He always knew. The Bray fortune wasn't built on railways. That was the surface-level illusion, the public tale. In reality, Victor's wealth was born from contracts buried in the aftermath of war, where stolen relics, papal correspondences, and heretical texts changed hands like poker chips. He wasn't a businessman, he was a curator of forbidden knowledge, and Selene was the final missing piece, the vessel his inner circle had been waiting generations for. You see, what Selene carried wasn't genetic, it was ancestral coding, a pattern imprinted on certain bloodlines. Victor didn't need her love, he needed her access to awaken something ancient, something bound and buried beneath the foundation of Chicago itself. Selene began to change in late 1906. She stopped attending functions, refused meals, began burning pages from books no one else remembered owning. She spoke to people who weren't there, or perhaps weren't visible to those without the key. She scribbled strange diagrams in the margins of the Tribune. Most troubling of all, she kept insisting someone had rearranged her dreams. Victor grew cold. The mansion staff was reduced from 16 to 6. Mirrors were covered, windows nailed shut, and the western wing sealed entirely. Whatever was happening inside that house wasn't madness, it was containment. And Selene was not the prisoner. She was the gate. On the morning of January the 4th, 1907, the day after Selene Bray vanished, a young constable named Elias Booker was dispatched to the Halden Bray estate. He would never speak publicly again. According to unofficial transcripts retrieved decades later, Booker arrived at 6:42 a.m. Snowfall had blanketed the city overnight, and yet there were no footprints in or out of the estate grounds. The iron gate, typically guarded, stood wide open. The mansion itself, silent, not just quiet, unnaturally, oppressively still. When Booker stepped into the foyer, he described a suffocating pressure, like the air had been pulled out of the walls. The grandfather clock had stopped at exactly 3:07 a.m. Every candle was burned down to the wick, all of them, and beneath the chandelier lay a pile of ash, carefully arranged in the shape of a human body. But there was no smell of fire. He called out, no response. In the dining hall, he found a table set for two, silverware polished, wine uncorked, untouched. A single note lay beside one of the plates. It read, "She is no longer in time." The handwriting matched Selene's, except inverted, as if written in reverse by someone viewing the world from the other side of a mirror. Upstairs, the bedroom was pristine, the bed still made, Selene's silk dressing robe laid out as if awaiting her return. But it was what Booker found in the study that ended his career. The room was locked from the inside. When he broke through, he found the walls covered in symbols, drawn in chalk, paint, and something that looked suspiciously like blood. The windows had been boarded from within, and in the center of the room sat a circle of mirrors, 7 in total, all facing inward, and within that circle, nothing. No signs of struggle, no Selene, just the echo of her voice on the phonograph repeating one phrase in an unrecognizable tongue. Booker left too. He housed within minutes. By noon, he had resigned. By evening, his written statement had been seized by federal agents and replaced with a one-sentence official report. No trace of the subject was found, and so the illusion began. The city moved on, but the men behind the curtain didn't forget, because Selene didn't disappear. She crossed over. Chicago kept breathing. Factories roaring, trains shrieking, newspapers humming with scandal and soot, but in the Bray estate something had ruptured. Victor Bray didn't mourn. He vanished from public life. No more galas, no more senators at his table. His name slipped from the lips of society, replaced by whispers of strange lights behind curtained windows, of chanting at 3 a.m., and guests who arrived in black carriages with no drivers. By February, 3 of the remaining 6 staff members had gone missing. One of them, a chambermaid named Irene Kell, was found weeks later wandering near the lake. Her shoes were gone. Her eyes burned white. She kept repeating the same thing in a child's whisper. "She's not dead. She's watching from the wall." The second, a cook, was discovered in the boiler room. His body contorted, every bone pulled inward, as if collapsed by unseen pressure. No sign of trauma, no heat damage, just a mouthful of mirror shards and a journal in his apron pocket. The last entry, "We fed her something that was never meant for the living." And the third, never found. Only a name remained, Harriet Voss, and a single page torn from a servant ledger, smeared with wax and salt. Her name had been crossed out, not erased, bound, ritualistically marked. Victor knew exactly what was happening. He wasn't unraveling. He was waiting. Selene hadn't run away. She hadn't been taken. She had been activated. Whatever ancient architecture of power she carried in her blood, it had been lit like a fuse. And Victor? He had triggered it, not out of malice, not out of love, but necessity. There are chambers beneath Chicago, real ones, sealed ones, older than the city itself, lined with obsidian, guarded by inscriptions too old to be Latin, carved long before colonists arrived. Victor was part of the syndicate that funded the railway expansion, not to see connect cities, but to map ley lines, energetic veins of the earth used in old-world rituals to control time, perception, and will. Selene wasn't just some wife, she was a key. And now that the door had been opened, something had begun to leak through. Not a ghost, not a demon. Something older than names. March 1907. The Bray estate was declared uninhabitable by city officials, though no one could agree on why. The official report cited structural instability due to sub-foundation erosion, but multiple engineers sent to inspect the property refused to re-enter after a single visit. One of them, a man named Arthur Langley, was found days later in a river, having removed his own eyes with a sharpened ruler. He left a note in his coat pocket. There were stairs that went down, but not into earth. They went into memory. Victor Bray was not seen publicly again. But something continued to move through that house. Neighbors reported hearing organ music late at night, though the mansion had no organ. A child swore he saw a woman made of shadows staring from an attic window, her face folded like paper. And once a month, without fail, a black carriage arrived at the estate at midnight, stayed for 13 minutes, then vanished without ever opening its doors. Behind the scenes, a different kind of investigation was underway. Private files, now declassified, show that members of the American Society for Psychic Inquiry were brought in under the guise of electrical inspectors. Their findings were sealed for 50 years. But here's what we know. In the Bray Library, the one Selene had locked before her disappearance, investigators found a false wall behind the third bookshelf. Behind it, a stone altar carved with pre-Egyptian markings, a ring of salt perpetually undisturbed, and a set of 28 copper discs engraved with symbols matching none from any known language. Each disc was placed with exacting precision, as if part of a celestial lock, but one disc was missing. The 14th, the one Selene kept hidden in her vanity, beneath the mirror she had blackened the night she vanished. This wasn't magic. This was ritual engineering, a technology of the ancient mind passed down through bloodlines, cloaked in myth to deter modern eyes. Victor hadn't simply opened a door. He had dialed a frequency, one that allowed her, or the thing she became, to remain partially tethered in our world. She didn't just disappear. She split. And if you listen closely, if you press your ear against any old mirror in a house built before 1910, you might still hear her breathing. Spring 1907. The city bloomed. But inside the Bray estate, the season never changed. Anomalies began stacking, events dismissed by skeptics but archived by the observant. Postal workers reported that letters placed at the Bray gate vanished mid-delivery. A local priest who tried to bless the grounds collapsed mid-sermon with a broken jaw, though no one touched him. And the last known photograph of the house, taken by a journalist from the Chicago Courier, developed with a black smudge covering every window. Inside that smudge, the faint outline of a face, upside down. The Courier never published it. The photo still resides in a private collection, and in the bottom right corner, scribbled in pencil, are the words, "Her reflection eats the light." You see, this wasn't about madness. It wasn't grief. It was architecture, of the mind and of the house. The Bray mansion was designed in sacred ratios, mapped to mirror certain stars as they appeared not in 1907, but in 9007 BC. There were 33 rooms, 7 sealed chambers, and a staircase that, when walked in complete silence, never repeated the same number of steps. This wasn't home, it was a machine, and Selene was its power source. Victor Bray understood what the world now forgets, that some structures aren't built to shelter. They're built to summon. The estate was a mirror of an older world, one hidden behind the veil of the visible. Selene didn't simply vanish. She was absorbed, fused with the design, stitched into the very fabric of the mansion. One surviving member of Victor's inner circle, a man known only as the archivist, claimed in a private letter that Selene's breath altered time within the walls, that clocks spun backward when she neared, that shadows moved independent of light. His final note read, "I heard her whisper my true name, a name I did not know. And then, I was 7 years old again." After that, his handwriting devolved into symbols, the same ones Selene drew in the margins of newspapers, symbols meant not to communicate, but to awaken, and they began to appear in other places, etched into alley walls, carved into chapel pews, hidden in the folds of antique dresses. Because Selene didn't die, she expanded, and the world began to bend. By summer 1907, the city's memory began to splinter, not in the newspapers, not in the court records, but in people. Multiple residents of Pittsburgh's elite neighborhoods, judges, surgeons, scholars, were found wandering aimlessly in the early mornings, unable to remember their names. When shown photographs of their own homes, they recoiled, insisting, "That's not my house, that's where she lives." They spoke of a woman with no eyes who appeared only in mirrors, who whispered truths too large for the human mind. One man, a coal baron named Jonathan Kessler, went so far as to seal every reflective surface in his mansion with tar. Days later, he was found dead, not from violence, from silence. No bruises, no poison, no disease. But his body was folded, knees tucked into his ribs, face contorted into a smile, fingers shattered and arranged into a symbol traced back to Mesopotamian burial rites. Whatever had entered the Bray house had begun to exit, and it chose the powerful first. There are hidden protocols in the upper layers of society, handbooks not taught in schools but passed down through blood. They warn of thin spaces, structures that connect our world to something else, something hungry, something watching. The Bray estate was one such place, and Selene Bray was never its prisoner. She was its voice. Her journals, recovered decades later and buried in the Vatican's restricted archives, spoke not of fear but rapture. She wrote of echoes that walk, of learning to move without moving, of seeing from behind the eyes of others. And most disturbingly, Victor did not summon me, I summoned him. He was the offering. That changes everything. Victor Bray, the millionaire, the tycoon, the puppeteer of industrial Chicago, was never the master. He was the vessel, the hinge, the last necessary chord in a ritual set in motion before he was born. The city thought Selene disappeared, but in truth she awakened, and the ones who knew, they didn't try to stop her, they joined her. In October of 1907, something impossible happened. 10 separate clocks across Pittsburgh, in banks, towers, and train stations, all stopped at 3:17 a.m., not 1 minute before or after, all 10 inspected, no mechanical failure, no tampering, they simply halted. Time itself hiccuped. That same night, an underground séance held by the Mather Society, a secretive group of ex-theologians and occult historians, ended in what newspapers called a collective fugue. Every participant, 14 in total, was found catatonic, seated upright at the table, eyes wide open, mouths sewn shut with their own hair. One word was scrawled in blood on the ceiling: return. Return. To what? To whom? The Bray estate had by now become a dead zone. Photographs refused to capture it, animals wouldn't approach it, and the foundation beneath it had cracked in a pattern that exactly matched an ancient Babylonian celestial gate map, one known to only a handful of living scholars, and one Selene had copied by hand in her final journal entry. Victor's name no longer appeared in financial ledgers, his influence dissolved like smoke, but whispers spread of a mirror cult operating out of the old rail tunnels, people who met in silence, who carried mirrors wrapped in velvet, and who believed that Selene was no longer human, but an aperture, an interface between worlds. Because it wasn't just the Bray house anymore. Symbols identical to those carved into her vanity mirror began to surface across the East Coast, tucked into stonework, painted beneath bridges, tattooed on bodies pulled from rivers. One fire chief in Allegheny found a burned infant's crib surrounded by salt and bones in the attic of a home never registered on city records. No one knew who built it or how it got there. But beneath the ashes, carved into the wood floor, was a single sentence in reversed Latin. Through her, all thresholds open. This wasn't possession, it wasn't haunting. This was arrival, and it was just the beginning. By winter 1907, the city began to lie to itself. Maps redrew without notice, streets renamed, families found records of ancestors that never existed, photos of weddings that no one remembered, dated decades before their time. A woman claimed she lived at 1413 Ashmore Lane, yet that address had never been part of the city grid. Officials shrugged it off as clerical error, but the woman disappeared 2 days later. And when investigators checked the spot where her house allegedly stood, they found only a patch of scorched ground with the smell of perfume lingering in the air, a blend of violet, ash, and something fermented. The city archivist at the time, Ruth Winslow, kept a secret ledger, a parallel log of the anomalies she couldn't explain. In it, she recorded the following: 10 children at Whitmore School claimed their teacher split into 3 and spoke in different voices from each mouth. Gaslight flickering in Morse code. Translation: I see you. A man found floating 12 feet above the altar at St. Helena's. Priest called it divine. I disagree. Ruth's entries stopped abruptly in early December. Her last sentence: she walks now, not in shadow, but in thought. What does that mean? Here's the forbidden truth. Selene Bray didn't vanish. She transmitted, into structures, into symbols, into the very patterns of belief and memory. She was no longer bound by flesh. Her presence became mimetic, self-replicating. The house wasn't her prison. It was her antenna. Everything strange that followed, the clock halts, the mouthless children, the reversed Latin, the burned cribs, it all pointed to a larger structure being assembled beneath reality, a scaffold for something that didn't belong in this world, but had learned how to be invited. And the invitation was always us, our fear, our hunger for mystery, our unwillingness to look away. In 1907, Pittsburgh did not simply witness a haunting, it became a receiver. And Selene Bray, the billionaire's wife, the socialite, the recluse, became the broadcast. January 3rd, 1908. The temperature plummeted to record lows, but the ground behind the Bray estate was found scorched. No fire, no accelerant, no tracks in or out, just a perfect spiral of blackened earth 33 feet wide, dug 6 inches deep, as if something had curled itself out of the soil and vanished into the air. Locals called it the Devil's Brand. The city called it erosion, but one man knew better. His name was Dr. Emil Krauss, a German-born psychiatrist turned metaphysical cartographer. He claimed to have mapped psychic disturbances across America, spikes of unexplainable terror, compulsive dreams, suicidal ideation, and all his lines converged at one place, the Bray House. Dr. Krauss called it a fixed tear in the emotional field. A trauma site so intense it became a permanent echo. He traveled to Pittsburgh in secret, arriving with a team of 6, none of whom returned, except for one, a linguist named Harold Cleve. When questioned, Cleve repeated a single sentence over and over. She was speaking through the walls, but not to us, to something beneath. His hands never stopped shaking. He died 11 days later from what was officially ruled self-inflicted exsanguination. But here's what the coroner's notes left out. His blood had been arranged in concentric circles, and his eyes had been replaced with jet-black stones. The same stones found in Selene's childhood jewelry box. We are not talking about a disappearance anymore. We are talking about a reconfiguration of matter, of memory, of meaning. Selene Bray was not abducted. She was not murdered. She did not flee. She shed. She stepped beyond form, into idea, into design, into something older than language and louder than thought. And the Bray estate, it didn't remain empty. It waited, and what returned didn't knock. The Bray estate was officially condemned in February of 1908, but no demolition ever took place. No crew would go near it. Machinery failed on approach. Horses panicked. Workers quit. And the one foreman who insisted they proceed, Thomas Reed, was later found hanging from the 3rd-story banister, though the staircase had already been removed. His final words scrawled in soot on a steel beam. She's building something. Not walls, not rooms, but a pattern, a living geometry, something growing across time and perception, not confined to wood or stone. The Bray house became a site of emergence, like a cocoon that never opened but leaked, and the leakage began to infect. In the following months, children across Pittsburgh sketched diagrams of the Bray mansion without ever seeing it. A pianist at the Franklin Opera House collapsed mid-performance, screaming, "Her hands are inside mine," before his fingers twisted backward and shattered. And at the Carnegie Library, a book was returned that had never been part of the collection, bound in human hair, no title, its pages a mix of reversed English and phonetic Aramaic. One sentence was underlined repeatedly. They buried her name to keep it warm. This is where things get dangerous. Because Selene Bray's story isn't just a Gothic tale, it's a template. Every generation has one. The woman erased, the wife gone mad, the silence after the wealth, the unexplained smile in the final photograph. These are not isolated events. They are iterations of something ancient. Selene was not a singular entity. She was a repeating function, a doorway wearing different skin. And when the world forgets her, when history deletes her from the ledgers, when no one speaks her name, that's exactly when she is strongest. Obscurity is the altar, and we unknowingly are its faithful. It's now spring, 1908. And the Bray estate has become a myth you can feel in your bones. Children dare each other to touch the rusted gate. They say you can hear a woman sobbing through your fingertips. The older generation refuses to even name the place, calling it simply that house. But one man doesn't run from it. He moves in. His name is Avery Bell, a former industrialist who renounced his wealth and claimed he was called to the house by a voice in a gramophone recording that had never been made. He walks the halls alone, barefoot, wearing a necklace made of teeth, not his own. He keeps only 3 items in the house: a copper mirror, a child's music box that plays without winding, a diary bound in lambskin said to have been written by Selene's mother long before Selene was born, and long after she had died. Inside the diary, one passage repeats: "She's not coming back, because she never left. You're just now starting to see the edges of her." Neighbors say the windows glow green at night, not from light, but from something behind the glass that isn't reflecting, but watching. One priest attempts an exorcism. He vanishes for 11 days, returns with all his hair turned white, and refuses to speak a single word until the day he dies. He only leaves behind one note: "We were not meant to witness reassembly." The question is no longer, where did Selene go? The question is, what is Selene now? The woman who dined with titans, the billionaire's wife, the socialite with the silver smile. She has become a breach, not just of place, but of meaning itself, and anything that steps through her comes with new rules. May 1908. A dry thunderstorm crackles above Pittsburgh for 19 hours straight. No rain, no wind, just lightning, always striking the same patch of sky over the Bray estate, as if the storm was searching for something. The power grid in surrounding neighborhoods surges and collapses. Telegraph lines emit whispers in Morse, not code. When translated, her shape is learning yours. Meanwhile, newspapers begin erasing mentions of Selene Bray. Entire microfilm reels go missing from archival libraries. Photos in city records fade, but not entirely. Her outline remains just slightly misaligned, like a double exposure. Her smile stretches. Something is being rewritten, but not in ink, in consciousness. People begin dreaming of a staircase that never ends, one that spirals downward forever. At the base, a woman with no face brushing her hair. She offers you a silver key and says only, "You've always lived here." Victims of these dreams report waking with mud under their fingernails. One man, a mason by trade, claws at his own chest and cries, "I was the wall, I was the wall." He dies an hour later, his ribcage inexplicably engraved with the Bray family crest. This is no longer a haunting, it's a contagion. Selene Bray's disappearance wasn't an ending, it was an ignition. A design beginning to run on its own, recursive, sentient, ravenous, and it does not stay confined to the house, to Pittsburgh, or to time. You see it again in 1931. A woman disappears in Prague after building an identical spiral staircase in her basement. You see it in 1955. An entire psychiatric ward in Buenos Aires goes silent for a week, every patient drawing the same woman, no face, no eyes, silver comb. You see it in your own dreams. Yes, you. Because you've heard her now, you're listening to her pattern, and once you do, she listens back. June 1908. A new name appears in the Bray estate ledger. Genevieve Moraine, a folklorist, a skeptic, and some say, a spy for an unnamed spiritualist society in France. She had no interest in ghosts. She came to Pittsburgh hunting something older. A pattern of disappearances across centuries. Elite women, always married to powerful men, always vanishing without a trace, always preceded by the same 3 signs. A spiral formation carved into wood, glass, or flesh. A change in mirrors, reflections that arrive half a second late. And finally, the birds. Gathering in silent circles, not flying, watching. Moraine kept detailed notes, and in her last surviving entry, written the night before she entered the Bray estate, she wrote, I do not believe in the paranormal, but I do believe in design, and Selene Bray is not dead. She is being constructed. Moraine entered the house with a phonograph, a crucifix, and a vial of quicksilver. She never came out, but her phonograph did. It was found 2 weeks later in the hollow of a burned elm tree 14 miles away. Still playing, though the record had melted. The audio has since been lost, but 2 researchers documented what they heard. It began with the sound of breathing, then soft humming, a woman's voice, then a whisper. You've remembered too much. Then nothing. No clicks, no static, just void. The kind of silence that makes your skin feel like it's remembering someone else's touch. You see, this story isn't about a disappearance. It's not even about Selene Bray. It's about a process, a transformation that repeats like ritual across centuries, hiding behind wealth, behind grief, behind the illusion of vanishing. It doesn't matter if it's Pittsburgh, 1908, or elsewhere now, because the ritual has already begun again. Every time her name is forgotten, she grows clearer, and the next time you see your reflection ripple, ask yourself, whose eyes are blinking back? The Bray estate has now been fenced off by the city. Official reason? Structural instability. But locals know better. What's unstable is not the house, it's what it invites. At 2:14 a.m. on July 9, 1908, the Bray groundskeeper is found curled beneath the hedge maze, eyes sealed shut with wax. Not his own. There's no sign of fire, only a circle of dead birds surrounding him. No wounds, no struggle, as if they died watching something. He survives. But he never speaks again. Instead, he draws, over and over, the same image. A woman, featureless, seated at a long dining table. Every chair is empty but hers. She is waiting, but not for food. She's waiting for someone to notice that they've already been seated. This is where theory collapses, because up to now this could be explained. Hysteria, hallucination, mass delusion. But then something impossible happens. A letter arrives at the Pittsburgh Tribune. It's addressed not to an editor, but to you. No name, no address, just to the one who seeks her. The paper is thick, watermarked with a French crest no historian can trace. The ink, dried blood, human. The handwriting is not known to any analyst, not because it's illegible, but because it shifts between each line, almost like it's being written through someone. The letter reads, "The wife is not missing. She has moved into the walls between seconds." When your memory begins to blur at the edges, when a clock ticks but never talks, that's when you are close to her. She feeds on the moments you don't notice. And now that you've looked for her, she is looking for you. This is not paranoia. It is the price of attention. Because when you look too long into forgotten history, you find it looking back. And history, real, mythic, forbidden, doesn't like to be disturbed. It prefers its secrets fed, not solved. And Selene Bray, she is the hungriest secret of them all. Late July 1908. The city begins to experience a strange static hum, low and constant, only perceptible in certain places. A train station bench, a church pew, the northeast corner of the Carnegie Library. It has no source, no mechanical explanation, and yet those who hear it feel the same thing. She's nearby. People begin disappearing again. A nurse walking home from West Penn Hospital. A paperboy whose final delivery is found beneath the Bray estate gate, folded into the shape of a swan. A chimney sweep who scratched the word mirrored into every brick he touched for 3 weeks. Each vanishing occurs at 3:13 a.m., each accompanied by the same atmospheric distortion. Birds flying backward, clocks running in loops, milk spoiling mid-pour. Reality, as one witness put it, becomes too thin to stand on. City officials dismiss it all. They blame tuberculosis, alcohol. They say Pittsburgh is stressed, superstitious. But then a mass dream occurs. Over 24 people from unrelated walks of life all report the same vision, a grand ballroom, lit by chandeliers of teeth, and a single figure dancing at the center, barefoot, dress soaked in ink, spinning in place for hours. Her face is a blur of everyone you've ever lost. When shown photographs, each dreamer points to the same woman, Selene Bray. But here's where it turns. A few of them don't wake up. They remain in catatonic stillness, eyes open, pulse steady, but unresponsive. Doctors call it waking sleep, but the body scans show something else. Each of their brains begins forming a new lobe, something unknown, a spiral shape, growing slowly, not human, not quite. And inside that lobe, in electrical pulses, a song is forming, the same melody found in the Bray music box, the same tune Selene used to hum when she thought no one was listening. This is no longer folklore, this is invasion, subtle, elegant, designed, not of the body, not even of the mind, but of time itself. And soon, the world won't ask, who was Selene Bray? It will ask, when did she become us? August 1st, 1908. A letter is discovered beneath the floorboards of room 3A at the Allegheny Sanitarium, written in a style decades older than the ink itself. Signed only, a witness in reverse. The paper is impossibly preserved, the seal, a spiral etched into wax. But beneath it, when melted, is embedded a human tooth. The letter reads, "She did not vanish. She was recalled." It continues, "Selene Bray was the pattern perfected, not the origin. She was the result of generations refining a vessel for something older than language, a memory with intent, a hunger with architecture. You call it disappearance, we call it eclipse." Below the letter is a detailed sketch, the Bray estate, but not as it stands. It's taller, narrower. Its windows are gone. In their place, mirrors. In this version, the house is not a home, it's a lens. And when you stare through it, you don't see the past, you see what's about to replace you. That same week, researchers finally gain access to Selene Bray's private journal, thought lost in the fire of 1899. But its pages are blank, at first, until held to candlelight. Then her handwriting emerges, but written backward. Translated, the first words are, "I was never yours, I was hers." Each entry grows more cryptic, more unsettling. Descriptions of being awake but not inside her body, of entire weeks she cannot account for, of the feeling that something else is watching from behind her eyes, and in the margins, frantic drawings of faces, dozens of them, each almost identical, except for one thing. Every face is missing its mouth. Somehow she knew. Selene wasn't just being erased, she was being reformatted. Her body was the vessel, her name, the trigger, her silence, the door. And now, that door is open. What walked through it is not Selene Bray, but it wears her skin, it sings with her voice, and it waits behind your reflection until you stop believing in coincidence. Because once you do, it has permission. Mid-August 1908. The Bray estate becomes the center of a widening ring of psychological collapse, but not random. It's targeted: scholars, skeptics, archivists, anyone who begins piecing together the pattern, anyone who remembers her name. They experience identical symptoms: sleeplessness without fatigue, a sensation of being watched from the inside out, sudden shifts in temperature, always localized around mirrors, photographs, or locked drawers. One survivor, a cartographer named Lionel Keane, left behind a final audio recording. His voice shakes, but he speaks clearly. "The Bray house is not haunted. It's haunted us into being. She isn't dead. She's in draft." That phrase, "in draft," like a document not yet finished, like a presence still being written. What does that mean? Keane explains. Every generation, there's a woman who disappears, always tied to power, always loved, and always forgotten, just long enough for history to lose track. Then her story returns, clearer, louder, but never quite real. Because she is learning to replace myth with memory, she is writing herself into the fabric of time, and she is nearly complete. Hours after the recording, Keane's apartment is found scorched from the inside, no sign of fire. His reflection is still visible in the hallway mirror, though he is gone. It blinks every 30 seconds. A priest is brought in. He lasts 4 nights before carving these words into the chapel door. She doesn't want worship. She wants inheritance. And then, the voice returns. Local children, unprompted, begin humming the same melody from Selene's phonograph. They claim they learned it in a dream. When asked who taught them, they don't say a woman, they say the silence. And so we ask, Was Selene Bray abducted, possessed, sacrificed? No, it's worse. She was chosen, and now, in the cracks between memory and myth, she is choosing again. September 1908. The city of Pittsburgh begins to forget her name. Not misremember, not dismiss, forget. Street reports are filed of men stopping mid-conversation, unable to recall who they were discussing. Newspaper archives are vandalized, every mention of Selene Bray scratched out with a razor or inked over in black. And then the photographs begin to change, not disappear. Shift. In early daguerreotypes from 1886, Selene once stood beside her husband at a city gala, poised, elegant, central. Now, she's on the edge of the frame, blurry, eyes misaligned, face stretched slightly, like the photo is being pulled from inside. Experts call it chemical degradation, but one curator disagrees. She compares dozens of photos from different locations, years, and formats. But in every one, Selene's head tilts more sharply than before. Not randomly, toward the viewer, like she's listening or leaning closer. And in one image, just one, she isn't looking at the camera anymore. She's looking past it, behind you. That same month, a retired detective named Thomas Rusk vanishes from his home. The only thing left behind, a wall of string-connected notes, maps, and letters. At its center is one phrase, carved in reverse into the plaster. You can't find her because she's already where you're going, not where you are, where you're heading. It reframes everything. Selene Bray didn't disappear in 1907. She arrived. That year wasn't an ending. It was an entry point, a seam torn open in Pittsburgh's timeline, stitched back together with a thread no one recognized until now. This isn't about who killed her or where she went. It's about what version of her is now using that moment, 1907, as an anchor. And whether we've already stepped into the world she prepared for us, because when someone rewrites their own disappearance, they don't vanish, they reappear in you. October 1908. The Bray estate is cordoned off, not by police, but by men in unmarked uniforms. They wear no insignia. They carry no standard rifles. Instead, they bring devices no one in Pittsburgh has seen before, triangular instruments that hum near stone, flash near mirrors, and shut off near blood. They aren't investigating. They're measuring. Within days, the surrounding homes are evacuated. Not due to gas leaks or structural collapse, but something else, a rising field of distortion. Time begins slipping near the Bray home, watches tick backward. People experience conversations before they happen. In one case, a man insists he watched himself leave the house before he entered. Local clocks are adjusted, but it doesn't help, because it's not time that's broken. It's the sequence of self. The idea that you are one thing, moving forward. That belief? Now optional. A letter surfaces, not delivered, just found, inside a piano at a local school. Typed, on unfamiliar paper, dated February 1909, but it's October. The letter reads, "It took centuries to locate the right body, even longer to convince it to stay." Selene Bray was not chosen for her wealth. She was chosen for her willingness to dissolve. There's a diagram below the text. The human brain. Next to it, the Bray estate's floor plan. They are nearly identical. One doctor remarks, "We've been walking through her mind for months, and never knew it." And in the middle of that diagram, a spiral. The same symbol burned into the underside of Selene's dressing mirror. Suddenly, a horrifying idea emerges. What if the Bray estate wasn't built to house her? What if it was built to incubate something else? And now, that thing is awake. It wears her voice. It shapes memory like wax. And it doesn't need to haunt the world, because it's teaching us to rebuild it in her image. Late October 1908, the nights begin to stretch, not just longer, but looser. Sleep no longer feels like sleep. It's more like a rehearsal for forgetting. Dozens across Allegheny report the same dream. A hallway with no end, a woman humming behind a door that doesn't open, and a mirror, tall, cracked and humming. When they look into it, they see themselves, older and smiling, but the mouth doesn't move. A local psychiatrist, Dr. Elgin Moreau, documents 43 cases before vanishing on Halloween night. His last notes, written in haste, smeared with wax, read, "These aren't dreams, they're practice runs, for possession." The following morning, the Bray estate's windows all reappear, but now they reflect only the viewer's mouth, wide open, silent, smiling. Journalists attempt to enter the estate. None return. But their notebooks do, pages torn, water-warped, burned at the edges. One line is circled on every page. She left the world not to flee it, but to reformat it. By now, Pittsburgh knows. This is no longer a disappearance. It's a reversal. Selene Bray isn't lost in time. She is writing time backward. The deeper you look into her story, the more your own memories begin to alter. Names you don't recognize in your family tree, old photos with a woman you don't recall, birthmarks that weren't there yesterday, and always the spiral, etched in the condensation of windows, drawn by children in chalk, carved into the bark of trees along Bray Hill. One priest collapses mid-sermon, whispering, "She is not a ghost, she is the author." And for the first time, that terrible question can finally be asked. What if Selene Bray didn't vanish into thin air? What if we did? And everything since has been lived inside her return. Mid-November 1908. Across Pittsburgh, the word wife begins to vanish from printed material. Newspapers omit it. Marriage records revert to partner. Sermons, speeches, even gravestones. Blank. It's not censorship. It's eviction. As if the concept itself has been excommunicated, replaced by a deeper, older title the city isn't ready to speak aloud. One historian, Leland Garver, digs into early Celtic myth. He finds stories of shadow brides, not women taken by death, but willingly wed to the silence between worlds. He writes, "They did not vanish. They were unfolded. Their skin became ink, and their mouths passageways." That same week, the Bray estate is found split open, not structurally, but conceptually. The kitchen now connects to a hallway that did not exist. The master bedroom no longer has walls, only black curtains that cannot be touched. Those who try say it feels like being looked at, from behind your own skull. Inside the estate study, an entire floorboard is lifted. Beneath it, a stone basin, empty except for one item. A ring, not gold, not silver, something like bone, burned, and around its curve, an inscription, "To what you will become, I do." It's not a wedding ring, it's a contract. Selene Bray didn't disappear because she was taken, she disappeared because she agreed. To what? That's the wrong question. The better one is, how many others did? Because now, similar houses are appearing, with impossible layouts, forgotten histories, and women who are remembered differently every week. The phenomenon spreads. Baltimore, Charleston, St. Louis. In each case, the same pattern. A woman of wealth, a sudden disappearance, a shift in the house, and then, the mirror. It's not just Selene Bray, it never was. It's a congregation, one we were never supposed to see, until they were sure we'd already become part of it. Late November 1908. The city holds its breath. Pittsburgh's skies stay overcast for 9 straight days, not gray, but yellowed, like the color of old bones soaked in tea. It doesn't rain, it doesn't storm, it simply waits. And so do the people. No one speaks of Selene Bray anymore, not out of fear, but out of something worse. Recognition. It's not her story they're afraid of. It's the parts they're starting to remember wrong. A mother recalls putting her daughter to bed, but the child insists it was Selene who sang to her. A butcher swears his wedding took place in a chapel. His wife shows him a photograph. It happened in the Bray estate ballroom, except that room was sealed. And his wife? She wasn't smiling in the photo yesterday. A whisper surfaces in salons and gentlemen's clubs. That time has been respoken. Not rewritten, not reversed. Respoken, as if the past were a script, rehearsed too many times. And Selene? She didn't forget her lines. She rewrote everyone else's. One man, a former architect, builds a scale model of the Bray estate by hand. He says it came to him in a dream. When completed, he places a drop of ink into the central atrium. It does not bleed outward. It pulls inward, spiraling into the center, disappearing without trace. When asked what the house is, he replies, "It's not a structure, it's a grammatical device, a way for her to speak through absence." They commit him that night. But his model, gone by morning. All that remains is a note pinned to the window. "We were never supposed to find her. She was supposed to find us. And she has." From that moment on, every mirror in the city reflects more than one face. Even when you're alone. December 1st, 1908. Snow falls for the first time, but it doesn't melt. Not on skin, not on flame, not even on time itself. It sits still, too still, as if every flake is waiting to be counted. Not by the sky, but by her. Selene Bray. By now, her name isn't just spoken in hushed tones. It's being written in places no hand could reach, etched into the frost on third-story windows. Appearing on the underside of teacups in hotels she never visited. Carved in candle wax at Catholic altars, always backward, always precise. One priest faints mid-confession, not from fear, but from remembering something he never lived. A wedding, in a black room. No candles, no guests, only her veil, floating, and her voice. "You will forget this vow, but it will not forget you." He wakes with a mark on his palm, a spiral within a circle, drawn in ash. Meanwhile, the Bray estate becomes porous, not in wood or stone, but in meaning. Visitors say it shifts. A staircase leading down becomes a hallway that never ends. Portraits blink. The piano plays 2 notes at 3:07 a.m., and the basement, sealed for decades, now leaks warm air, scented with rosewater and soot. They descend. At the bottom, a single room, round, smooth, no corners, and at the center, a mirror, untouched by dust. But the reflection doesn't show your face. It shows Selene, standing exactly as you are, mimicking every breath, except her mouth is slightly open, as if mid-sentence, and you know instinctively what she's saying. "You're not visiting me, you're returning to me. This is your shape too." Pittsburgh, 1908, begins to collapse inwards, not in fire or ruin, but in logic. Newspapers contradict themselves. Birth records loop. People forget how long they've lived in their own homes. Because Selene didn't disappear from reality, she is slowly becoming its replacement. December 8th, 1908. Pittsburgh is no longer a city. It is a condition. A psychic fog settles across its boroughs. Not weather, not madness, but a collective reframing of memory. Time folds. People greet strangers they're certain they've buried. Church bells ring without cause, and everywhere, in the periphery of vision, a woman in black waits to be seen. Not Selene Bray, not exactly. Something that wears her silhouette like a borrowed dress. At 3:07 a.m., in the orphanage near Southside, every child draws the same thing: a house with no door, a woman at the window, and inside, instead of furniture, rows of seated men, heads bowed as if in worship. They title their drawings, "Mother's Church." The matron burns the images, but finds them redrawn on the walls in charcoal, and worse, on her own skin. One word on her back, written in cursive, carved like lace: reverence. That night, 12 households across the city awaken to find their living rooms rearranged. Not just furniture, blueprints. Closets become prayer rooms, chimneys hum like tuning forks. And every dining room mirror shows not the family, but Selene, seated at the head of the table, smiling softly as if the meal is about to begin. By morning, the city's archivist resigns. He leaves behind a locked drawer. When forced open, it contains no documents, only a spool of black ribbon and a single printed phrase: "She never vanished. She was offered, and we accepted." The mayor issues a public address. He urges calm, but during the speech, he freezes mid-sentence, eyes unfocused, hands trembling, and says, voice unfamiliar, "You are all already inside me." The broadcast cuts. No one speaks of it again, because this isn't just a haunting, it's preparation. Selene Bray is not a memory. She is the prototype of something worse, a version of the future where forgetting her is impossible because she has become the grammar by which the world explains itself. December 14th, 1908. Reality misfires. For 7 minutes, clocks stop. But people keep moving. Trains arrive before they depart. A man walks into a room he hasn't built yet, and finds himself already inside, reading a letter he hasn't written. In that letter, she is no longer a person. She is the punctuation at the end of every thought. Pittsburgh wakes to perfect silence. Not quiet, but absence. Birds don't chirp. Wind doesn't blow. Even the river stops, mid-current, frozen not by ice, but by intent. People try to flee. They don't make it past the city limits. Not because they're stopped, because they forget where they were going, like the city has sewn itself into the fabric of their minds. One man makes it to Ohio. He walks into a post office and whispers, "I wasn't born." They send him to a sanitarium. By morning, the entire staff dreams of the Bray Estate's staircase, now descending into wet stone, red light, and chanting that doesn't come from mouths but from walls. Selene is becoming topology. Not a ghost, not a demon, a rule that matter obeys. In a university lecture on metaphysics, a professor erases his notes mid-sentence and says, "We misunderstood. She didn't vanish. We were edited. Every story has a spine, a central arc, a final point. Selene Bray is rearranging that point. You no longer ask, where did she go? You ask, what was here before she arrived? And the answer is unbearable. Because before Selene, there was no structure, no narrative, only noise. She gave the world a center, and now that center is expanding. Mirrors hum, photos develop with faces no one remembers posing for, and your memories begin to misalign. Slightly at first, then permanently. You swear your mother's voice has changed. Your name feels misspelled. Your childhood bedroom smells like rosewater and sulfur. The Bray Estate still stands. Its door is unlocked, but no one walks in. Because to enter now would be to admit something horrifying. You've already been inside it. December 21st, 1908, the longest night of the year. But this time, the sun doesn't rise. Not fully, not here. Light bends unnaturally above Pittsburgh, like it's being filtered through memory, not atmosphere. And beneath it all, the Bray Estate. Once a home, now an organ. Breathing, watching, remembering. For those brave or broken enough to enter, there is no threshold. The moment you step forward, you're already inside. Not the house. Her. Inside Selene Bray. The hallways are endless, each one constructed from moments that never happened, yet feel deeply familiar. A wedding where no one speaks. A dinner where the meat on the plate is your handwriting. A nursery where the cradle rocks without wind and hums the lullaby your mother never sang. You're not walking. You're retracing. Because Selene doesn't haunt this place. You do. You are the echo. You are the ghost. And as you descend the final staircase, spiraling downward in a geometry no architect would draw, you find yourself in a room where time has no texture. Selene stands at the center. Not beautiful, not monstrous, but inevitable. Her eyes are closed, her hands open, as if she's holding the shape of something unspeakable, something already inside you. She speaks, not aloud, but through your bones. They didn't mourn me. They repurposed me, turned my silence into a structure, my grief into their grammar, my disappearance into their doctrine. She smiles, a slow, maternal smile, and finishes. And now, I will do the same to them. The lights in the Bray Estate do not go out. They invert. Dark becomes light. Forgetting becomes belief. And the world outside, the one you thought was safe, rational, real, is now nothing more than a mirror of her will. December 22nd never comes. Not here. Because history is now a closed loop, and Selene Bray is its author, its editor, its final breath. And the woman who vanished? She never did. She rewrote what it means to exist, and you've been reading her story ever since.